Hello and welcome to CMTV episode 18. I'm Aubrey Going.
And I'm Alison Kavanagh.
So, Ali, what are you going to be talking about today?
I'm going to be talking about the solar plexus and authenticity.
Interesting. Okay, so continuing on with our theme of talking about the different chakras or energy centers.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the subject of our recent episode. I'm not sure if our viewers are aware of this, but we've started a new series called Living Anatomy. And in the upcoming episode that's coming out shortly, we've already filmed, where I'm going to be talking about groin strain. So looking at what is the mechanism and also how to do some self-treatment and some home care as well. So we'll look at elements of that. Do you want to start maybe with solar plexus?
Yeah, sure.
Cool.
So the solar plexus is located in the abdomen, just above the navel, below the diaphragm. It's associated with the color yellow, the sun,
Okay.
radiance,
Right.
and the element of fire.
Okay. Well, that kind of ties in.
Yes,
The sun being the big ball of fire in the sky. Okay.
yes, indeed. So the solar plexus governs organs such as the pancreas and even organs like the liver, the gallbladder, the large intestine, and the skin. So sometimes if there's dis-ease in any of these areas, there could be some implications with our connection to our solar plexus.
That's interesting because the pancreas and the liver we'd both think of as being responsible for the energy systems with the body, where the pancreas is involved in what we do with sugars and things like that.
Yeah,
We use glucose in the body.
yeah,
And then the liver being our organ of detoxification and one of the most metabolically active tissues in the body.
yeah. It's
So
like
that's
the
interesting.
radiator of the body. There's
Yeah,
over 500 functions that we know about.
that we know about. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
indeed.
cool.
So, energy centers both absorb and emit light.
Okay.
So again, the analogy we used before was like a dial. We can have the dial turned up or
Hmm.
we can have it turned down.
Yeah.
So this governs our truth, our personal power, our core of our being.
Okay. I suppose being in the center of the body, it is kind of the core of the your anatomy, but also the core of who you are.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's nearly described like a distributor cap in a car that it determines the direction of energy and where it flows to in the body. So it affects internal direction of our energy and external, what we radiate out into the world.
Okay.
So it's influenced by our thoughts. So if we were very emotional, it might direct the energy to our adrenals. If we're very focused on our purpose and what we're here to do, it might direct the energy to the pituitary. So
Okay.
it's to do with direction
Okay.
within the body.
So just for those who maybe aren't familiar, the distributor cap in an engine is what directs fuel to each of the cylinders. So in modern cars, say you'll have fuel injection and it will inject it to the distributor and then the distributor will sequentially send it to the appropriate cylinder that's about to fire.
Yeah.
So in the same way, the solar plexus will send energy or direct the function of different other endocrine centers depending on our mental, emotional state, all those kind of things. The usual, the holistic combination of who and what we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the law of life that governs this energy center says what is within is without. So if there's great peace and harmony and ease in us, that is reflected within the body. But equally, if there's conflict and strife and confusion, that'll be radiated out into all of our relationships. So it affects our relationships to ourselves and our relationships to everything around us.
Okay. So that would be kind of a good way for people to almost determine for themselves what way that is functioning. That if you have constant strife around you, that might be an indicator. If you have, like, occasionally things will come up.
Yeah,
There's so many influences. There are things that are, we'd certainly perceive as being beyond our control. So, like, the occasional thing might not be much of a piece of data on its own. But if you have multiple sources of data, if you have multiple conflicts across multiple relationships that's ongoing, constant in your life, that might be an indicator of dysfunction within you in this center,
yes,
that it may not be expressing the energy optimally.
in a harmonious way.
Harmonious. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's what we're radiating out into our environment is being mirrored back to us. So if there's a pattern, it could be us.
Haha, yes. Yes, it's not you, it's me. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Um, so the areas around personal power, self-identity, self-acceptance, it really does influence our ability to be reliable,
Mm,
to take responsibility for what we're doing, and really to be authentic.
mm. So you're saying self-control and strength, kind of like an inner strength?
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people feel that they are lacking that.
Yeah.
They oftentimes feel that life, because I think they more likely focus on the external elements, and they will think that life seems out of control, their life seems out of control, the circumstances seem out of control. But if it's what is within is without, we need to look at the kind of things. I presume we're going to get to the steps of how to improve this, but the strength as well. I think a lot of people oftentimes don't feel they have that much inner strength, or might nearly associate that with stability and instability.
Mm-hmm.
They might feel that things are unstable.
Yes.
And if you have more inner strength,
Yeah.
more grit, some people would say, in the,
Yeah.
if you use the old vernacular, that you would, if you have that kind of grit and determination, I suppose that maybe is a little bit different, because that might be, you might be pushing yourself. This is more a calm
Yeah.
assuredness in yourself, a solidness in your person, your being. And again, not to be mistaken maybe with just stoicism, where you might be suffering. This should be a harmonious calm.
Yes.
So
Exactly.
that's a key identifying factor to, is it genuine?
Yes.
Which is kind of the whole theme. Is it authentic? Is it true? Is it your truth?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so if the energy is turned down in this energy center, we may experience things like depression, lack of direction, a lack of self-awareness, um, low confidence, and some people would describe it as imposter syndrome, where they don't feel that they are deserving of the place they're in, or
Mm,
that it's an effort to be there,
mm,
that it's not coming from the core of their being.
yeah. And that's quite a common thing as well. And I suppose that comes down to authenticity as well. That if you are true to yourself, if you hold to your own truth, then you do feel if you have earned something, it is earned.
Yes,
Because I think the problem for most people with imposter syndrome is they may have earned something, but they feel like they don't belong, they didn't deserve it, or something like that.
yeah,
Whereas if they are more connected with themselves, their own
flow of
truth, their own
energy.
self of being, their own flow of energy, they will feel that they will recognize really that what has come has been deserved.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So imposter syndrome, I think, is a huge one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that might lead to being overly controlling. If you don't have that connection to your truth, you're trying to control everything around you. It's like you're not connected to the flow of your own energy and to the flow of life. So when you're in harmony and this solar plexus energy is turned up, you feel that confidence, you feel that ease, you're able to adapt and flow with what life brings along.
Very good.
So overly competitive, like where I have to win at all costs. There isn't any competition when you're in connection with your own truth. You're expressing that. And it's not about people liking it or not liking it. It's you doing you.
Mm. Because I would always find that, I've very little interest in, like, I've always enjoyed partaking in different sport, but I never like when it gets to the point that usually once you develop a reasonable familiarity or skill, usually you're being pushed towards competition. And I was never interested in competition. And yet I think it's healthy to be competitive with yourself in that you want to do better.
Mhm.
And I think the difference is you're not damaging yourself, because some people will hammer themselves, they'll do themselves harm to, I have to push harder.
Mhm.
I don't see that as competing with yourself, trying to be your best version of yourself. I know it's a
Yes.
slightly overused phrase, but I think instead, if you were looking at it from a balanced perspective, you would still have drive to improve, to develop, to experience a different state, a more advanced state in your given pursuit, which isn't the same as trying to dominate yourself, or in competition with others dominating others. I'm going to beat you.
Yeah.
It's elevating yourself by nearly pushing down on somebody else. You've got to, and I think that's always a slightly unbalanced
Yeah.
expression of that.
Yeah.
So the hopefully the correct or balanced outcome would be that you still have drive, you're still motivated,
Hmm.
but it's coming from a place of exploration, a desire to see where you can go, rather than like I said, the kind of more negative things of beating yourself up.
Yeah, but sometimes people can feel a bit of a void, and then they try to fill that void with, it could be anything. It could be addictions, it could be shopping, it could be, you know,
Drama.
drama. Yes, most definitely.
Yeah.
And it's in an attempt to get back to their own truth.
Mm.
So it's not been turned away from yourself, like taking influence from parents, teachers, ministers.
Mm.
It's that you go within to find your own truth.
Yeah. I think most people relate to that because across that spectrum, I think most people are going to experience that in some capacity. That you will have some people that are going to try and fill what they may or may not recognize. Some people say filling that void, that gap, that hole
Emptiness.
within yourself, that emptiness. Other people I think don't even recognize it. They just drive towards filling. And I think for a lot of people it's filling with material things. And invariably, I mean, this is known. A lot of people who achieve success find that they feel worse because they did all the things they achieved, they have all the toys, and yet they still, the void, if anything, is more noticeable
Yeah,
because the things that when you don't have them, you imagine always that that's going to plug that void.
yeah,
But when you have them and it hasn't,
yeah,
people feel lost. They don't know where to go.
yes,
So really the answer is, and again, it's not about whether those things are right or wrong. You can have the toys so long as it's not trying to fill the void.
yes.
That when they get there and they realize the void is still there, then they have to pursue this kind of internal exploration to see, what is this?
Hmm.
How do I rectify it? How do I become more connected to myself?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So probably the emotional imbalance associated with this energy center is shame.
Ooh,
Yes, it's a big
that's a
one.
huge one.
Yeah,
Yeah. So most people feel shame, which may often be expressed then as a resentment as well.
yeah, and guilt
Guilt.
would
Yeah.
be a big one as
You kind
well.
of tie the three of those together, but the root presumably is shame.
Yeah,
And you can see why, because if you have been authentic and been true to yourself, there should be no shame. Whereas I think a lot of people nearly try to fool themselves. And then there's a shame because they know they're doing something that isn't right, it's not authentic, or they're treating people like in competition. They're maybe trying to harm themselves or harm others to get ahead, to win.
yeah,
And then they will feel shame over that.
yes,
So you can see how balance in the center, or would say a proper expression, a turning up of that energy, a clear expression of that solar plexus energy would lead to authenticity.
yes,
A turning down will lead to inauthentic action, words, deeds. And so as a result, you may feel shame because it's inauthentic.
yeah,
Because at a deep level, I think most people do know.
absolutely.
You know right from wrong, and you know when you're doing things that are wrong, even minor things like poor food choices. My hand slipped out and I've ate the whole packet of biscuits. That they do know, and they can see where the shame comes because there's a disconnect between what they know to be true and what they are doing.
Yes,
And so the resulting emotion was going to be shame.
yeah,
So really the simplest way to avoid that would be authentic.
absolutely.
So how can we work towards that?
Yeah, so to bring the center back into alignment, you are looking at acting with integrity,
Mm,
being authentic, as we said,
hmm.
taking personal responsibility
Yeah.
for your environment, for your actions, for your relationships.
Mm. I always find it interesting how these things tie in across where we've talked about things like how you behave when there isn't really consequences, like pushing in your chair in a restaurant. Not doing it is okay. But if you do, it's demonstrating that kind of authentic action, that you're looking out for others and how your action impacts others. So we talked as well about tidying a room was always one of Dad's favorites, that you may not have control over every environment in your life, and you're not really trying to exert control, but what you can do is be authentic in your own space
Yes,
and do the things that you know to be right, like simply tidying up after yourself,
yeah,
making sure your environment is clean,
yes,
hygienic,
yeah,
you know, presented the way you would like it to be presented.
yes,
That if a stranger were to walk into your room, you wouldn't feel shame. You wouldn't feel embarrassment. So that is a simple action that we can take to move towards authenticity.
yeah. It's not just about tidying your bedroom into the wardrobe and having it all piled in, and then somebody comes into the room and you're hoping they don't open the doors because it'll all fall out onto the floor.
Yeah,
So that, yeah, taking personal responsibility really
yeah.
comes into play there.
And if you're doing that right, you'll find the tidying the room carries over into the, you know, what's in the wardrobe. what's under the bed, that you tidy every aspect.
Yeah,
You're not trying to hide an aspect, which again would
exactly.
be inauthentic.
Yes, because the body is listening. So it's really important to talk kindly to yourself.
Mm.
We can be our own harshest critics,
Yeah.
and we can, shame ourselves for, oh, why did I eat that? Or why did I
Mm.
um, go there when I knew I didn't want to?
Yeah.
So listening and being aware of what we're focusing on, what we're directing our energy to.
I guess largely then we're talking about intuition,
Yeah,
listening to your inner self. Some people would call it like their inner critic, or you might say your gut instinct, or whatever
absolutely.
it might be. We've talked about this before, where when you start to focus on diet, you might be eating out somewhere and you'll look at a food selection and you'll go, don't eat that.
Yeah,
And it's a knowing within yourself.
yeah,
There's a reality to it that if you are listening to your intuition, your inner voice, your inner critic, whatever you want to call it, I think most people have experienced that at some point.
hmm,
And when you ignore it, you're not being authentic, and the guilt and shame and things like that will come as a result. When you do listen to it, you do kind of have to heed it. You have to take action. You have to
absolutely.
say what you should say. You have to behave the way you should behave. And I think for most people, that's kind of the stumbling block, because it might mean you don't eat the packet of biscuits.
Yes.
And they talk about this as really the secret to long term happiness, that instant gratification oftentimes leads to unhappiness.
Hmm.
Delayed gratification is what leads to long term happiness. So instead of the short term, I'll eat the biscuits to enjoy the sensation, I will not do that because tomorrow, next week, next month, I will feel better.
Hmm.
That's the delayed gratification. I won't have it now. I will feel those benefits over time.
Yeah,
And I think that's just that decision. And it has to be made moment by moment. And the more you listen to your inner voice, listen to your intuition, the clearer it becomes.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll speak more loudly.
Mm.
So things then that are going to help align this energy center. So practicing breath work,
Mm.
particularly abdominal breathing. In yoga terms, we used to call it the three-phase breath, breathing
Mm.
down into the belly and
Yeah.
filling each section of the lungs, retaining the breath, and then breathing out for twice the length of the inhale.
Mm. I like that one. I can see how we'd always talk about like when you're doing things like yoga postures, and we would associate the endocrine center with the energy center or the chakra.
Mhm.
And we would think in terms of if you apply a pressure that you actually increase blood pressure into the area,
Yeah.
you increase blood flow to the physical organ,
Hmm.
which will help with the energetic expression.
Yeah.
So if you're breathing into the abdomen like that and holding it, the physical pressure will put increased blood flow nearly into the solar plexus
Yeah.
as we breathe in and breathe out. Okay.
Definitely. So on that same line, particular yoga postures are particularly useful,
Mm.
like the retraction, we used to call it,
Yes.
where you blow out all the air, you're kind of in a half squat, and
Mm.
you pull the navel in towards the spine and then up towards the diaphragm, and it does get that compressive force, that squeeze
Yeah.
onto the solar plexus, and then you do
Let the
a
breath come in
release where
quick.
you bring the air
Yeah.
in through the nose and breathe out fully. And you can even retract the abdominal muscles and then isolate them, get as you get really
Mm.
proficient, get the rectus abdominis, the muscles in the abdomen to stand out, and
Yeah.
like between one side of the abdomen and the other.
BKS Iyengar used to do a lot of those. So if you want to see it, Google Iyengar yoga and
Yeah,
the retraction
yeah,
or abdominal isolation that he used to call it, the
yes,
isolation, where the next phase of apart from pulling in all the abdominals, bringing out, like you said, the rectus or one side of rectus.
yeah.
Yeah, really, really good exercise.
Yeah, amazing. Um, Abdominal massage can be quite useful just
Mm.
for releasing tension around the internal organs, releasing the fascia,
Mm.
fascial adhesions. Maybe if somebody's had surgery where they inflated the abdomen, we talked about in other episodes.
Mm.
So just mobilizing the visceral organs, and just the relaxation of the kicking in the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest.
Yeah. So that's really using the physical aspect of our being as the lever. If we can improve the physical function, we've got a better chance of regulating the other elements of the emotional, the psychological, the energetic. So if it's hard to just get that energy to flow, some people will do that naturally. Some
Yeah,
people don't connect with that at all.
yeah.
If we improve the physical function, those things will.
Yeah,
improve as well. And that's
absolutely.
something we can do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even sound, getting that reverberation down into the abdomen.
Mm.
Some people find RAM repeated will cause that reverberation, that vibration into the solar plexus.
Yeah, we did this, I think, in the last episode. We did the yam one.
Yeah, for
So ram would be rum, 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 rum. That's maybe a little high. Rum, 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 rum. So I can feel a little bit lower.
yes.
So practicing again, like we said, with pitch.
Yeah, play around with it and
Yeah.
see what creates the best vibration there for
Mm,
you.
nice.
Something as simple as looking at the candle flame that it kind of has that yellow glow to it, and practicing the stillness and the connection to that solar
Ah, the
plexus.
flame in particular, fire. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So you have the color fire,
Color yellow.
color yellow, the fire, and the stillness
Mm,
that really helps you connect to the core of your being.
yeah.
Getting sunshine, getting natural light on the skin, really useful because
Yeah.
obviously we've the energy coming from the sun,
Yeah.
that beautiful light, and then as you said, it's involved with movement. It's taking action. It's following your truth and being true to yourself.
What do you think about fire as being a very active, burning a lot of energy, releasing a lot of energy?
Yeah.
So we can see how there's that kind of nearly kinetic component.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, it has to take action. It has to come out from the non-physical and through and move into the physical.
Ooh, which is like the being authentic within yourself and then that leading to authentic action,
Yes,
that it is being expressed out into your environment.
yeah, and all
Okay,
your relationships.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. So I suppose we could sum that up. We had a little expression you were saying. So ultimately, to improve function and the flow of energy through this chakra, we would say be true to yourself.
Yes,
That kind of sums it up. Be true to yourself. Be true to yourself in your thoughts, your words, and your actions
indeed.
and deeds. Yeah. So that's always the people say that, and it becomes almost a little bit trite. But when you put these things into practice, that's when it's changing, really life changing.
Yeah.
That otherwise you might just say it and it's a nice little platitude. But if you ever try it, even do it for a day, you'd see the impact that that has. And also, in contrast, how inauthentic we tend to be day to day in the little things without thinking about it.
Mm. So don't lie to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Ultimately, your body knows the truth, so ain't no lying anyway.
Nowhere to hide.
Good. Anything else you want to say about that?
No, that wraps it up.
Okay, very nice. So I was going to talk a little bit about our latest episode for our Living Anatomy series. So this is on Watch HCD. It's a subscription, but we do release elements of these onto social media as well, so keep an eye out. But the subject of episode 2 is groin strain. And groin strain is a pretty common one. It affects, I suppose, athletes more, but a lot of people who are non-athletes will also experience that kind of groin strain type pain, or they might simply think of it as pain towards the top of the thigh. It's kind of coming into the groin area. And we said the most common cause for that is the adductor muscles on the inside of the thigh. They start to pull on their tendon and the tendon gets irritated, and we can experience what's called simple tendon pain, just meaning there's no other complicating factors.
Mm-hmm.
So we went through a video. I might just put up a little bit of this so we can see. We'll talk over it. We won't do the full video. But in this video, I'm basically demonstrating the movement here of the femur. I'm explaining what adduction and abduction is. And we're talking about where the attachment of those tendons are onto the base of the pelvis. And then I go on to explain that really it's the abductors on the outside of the hip. And I think later in the anatomy stage, yeah, we're talking about the Trendelenburg. So the muscles that we're talking about there, the abductors on the outside of the hip, they don't often, I say this in the video, they're not really being used to swing the leg out to the side. Like unless you're John Cleese doing his funny walk sketch in Monty Python or something, we don't tend to do that movement that much. But where these muscles really get used is every time we're walking, every time we're running, we are standing on one leg at a time, because one leg is in what's called stance phase, as the other leg is in swing phase, whether you're walking, jogging, running, whatever it might be. So anytime you're standing on one leg, those muscles on the outside are actually helping to support the pelvis. So what we get is this Trendelenburg test is testing to see if these muscles are sufficiently toned.
Mm-hmm.
So if the muscles on the outside of the hip, we've glute medius, glute minimus, and TFL, if they were weak, you'd see in the image here, Aisling is kind of mimicking this. She's letting the right side of her pelvis, the opposite side of the one I'm pointing to there, drop down.
Mm-hmm.
So if those muscles weren't able to support your weight, you would sag over to the side like that
Mm-hmm.
when testing those muscles. Now, the reality is we don't tend to see that very often. I've never actually seen it in clinic. In 36 years of clinical practice,
No.
whenever I've done a Trendelenburg, I've never seen the person drop. You will see it in people who have neurological injury. You'll see it in the elderly and frail.
Mm-hmm.
Or if somebody maybe has, they've been, say, bedridden for some reason.
Yeah.
So there will be times that we will lose muscular tone there, but it's really quite uncommon. We don't see it very frequently. So I think what happens most of the time is those abductors from that repetitive use, they get overused, which means they actually become short and tight.
Yeah.
And we don't tend to stretch them very much. So they very rarely get an opportunity to really extend to their full length. So they get kind of fascially bound. They get stuck in this shortened position and the nervous system has them really switched on. So they're quite hypertonic. And we know through what's called the law of reciprocation that as one muscle is shortening, another muscle is lengthening.
Mm-hmm.
And the nervous system coordinates that. So as one muscle, like the abductors or glute medius minimus and TFL, as they're getting the signal to increase their tension, there has to be a corresponding relaxation, reduce your tone signal going to the opposite muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the adductors on the inside of the thigh.
Mm-hmm. I see it all the time in clinic.
Yeah. And when we test these, particularly in class where we have large groups of people, I would say probably somewhere between 50 and 70% of any given group will test as having weakness in the adductors. The confusing part is when they assess this and they check how far out the leg will come, a lot of people will be restricted.
Mm-hmm.
The muscles won't be able to lengthen fully on the inside of the thigh, those adductor muscles. Actually, we show those a little later in the video. Maybe we'll take a quick look because we use a little bit of augmented reality, which always brings the anatomy to life, makes it really interesting looking. So here I'm showing tensor fascia lata on the outside of the thigh,
Mm-hmm.
and then we spin the model around. I think, yeah, we show glute minimus just there, and then medius to the outside. And then later we show, there shows the fan-like arrangement of medius there. And then when we look at this overview, we see the adductor muscles here on the inside of the thigh. And it's these tendons up here at the pelvis. I think I actually even put in an indicator arrow here in a moment. Yeah, where those tendons are attaching at the top here, just to the base of the pelvis. This is where we tend to get the soreness. But these adductor muscles tend to be weak, but fascially bound. So that means their connective tissue is kind of stuck. So when you test them and you try bringing the leg out to the side, they've a restricted range of motion because they're stuck, not because they're tight. And this is why it's important to do multiple tests to give us a clearer picture. Because if we just checked range of motion, the assumption would be that those muscles are tight. And then we go down a incorrect path of treatment and home care, that we're trying to restore length and stretch muscles that are weak. Now, there's no harm stretching them once the other muscles have been treated, because we always say treat the cause first, treat tight muscles first before you treat symptoms, before you treat weak muscles. So the first step in reducing groin strain type pain is actually restoring length and normal tone to the abductors.
Yeah.
Then we can correct the stuck fascia in the adductors, and then we can do some strength work. And at the end of that progress, that's that chain, we should get to the point that we no longer have that tenderness, that simple tendon pain, and our groin strain symptoms are gone.
Excellent.
But it can tend to go on and on for a long period of time because people will continue to do the incorrect home care based on an incorrect assessment. So when we group assessments together, what's called cluster testing, it gives us a clearer picture that we see that these muscles may be restricted in their range of motion, but they also test as weak. So therefore, we know they're actually just stuck, not tight.
Yeah.
Which is a really easy mistake to make. Now, in the episode, we go on and we show self-treatment. So you can do this work on yourself, or you can extrapolate that out and apply the same techniques to your clients if you're a therapist. But it's really useful for even people who are not therapists, but want to know more about muscle balance, want to know more about how their body works, want to know more about how to correct those kind of things that will crop up from time to time. So we do self-treatment on the abductors first, because we always want to treat the tight muscles first. Then we work the adductors, and then we want to do home care. So we look at some stretching for those abductors and how to do some simple strength training for the adductors that we restore balance.
Excellent. Really good information.
Yeah. So those I think are, I hope, interesting to absolutely anybody, because I think most people are curious about how their body works. Should be of specific interest to people who either suffer occasional groin strain or people who are therapists and want to know how to treat and provide home care for that groin strain.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
So I think if people go to watchhcd.ie, there's
Yeah.
a 3-day free trial. They'll see the array of information available there.
Huge amount there. At the moment, we've said this before, that primarily focused on therapies. A lot of it is focused around treatment at various levels. So we go all the way from the simple to the very complex. But we will be broadening out the offering. So you're particularly interested in some
Breath
meditation.
work.
Yeah.
Did a very interesting class on holotropic breath and felt really invigorated after it. So we'll definitely put something together on that.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, meditation, maybe some of these sound therapies that would be useful to practice with, so that it's truly the holistic approach, that there's something there for everybody to do with the physical, mental, emotional, and energetic components.
Yeah. Sounds excellent.
Yeah, so be sure to give us a like, to comment on stuff in the podcast or wherever you're watching it on YouTube or Instagram, and yeah, follow along. We love to hear your feedback.
And again, we have already kind of outlined what we're doing over the next few episodes for that living anatomy, but we really want to use that kind of augmented reality technology to help people to understand where these structures are and what they can do about it. But of course, if there's particular things you'd like to see us cover, let us know in the comments, particular ailments, muscles that you'd like to understand better,
Yeah,
either their dysfunction or their location or how they're involved in day-to-day activities. So
yeah,
let us know what you think in the comments.
great.
Good. Anything else then before we wrap up?
No, I think that's good.
I think we're there. Okay. So thanks very much for watching, folks, and we'll see you again soon.
Take care.
Take care.